are now entering the Take Up, a place to gather when the film is over. I'm your host, Joshua Ray, and I'm here with my co-host, the managing editor of thetakeup.com, Andrew Wyatt. Hello, Andrew.
Hello.
Every episode, we decide if one film gets to enter the Take Up's permanent cinema. Today, we've got a guest. It's our old pal, Cliff Froehlich. He has chosen Taxi Driver. You know, we're getting some heavy hitters in here. Taxi Driver, the 1976 classic from Martin Scorsese, to talk about and see if we're gonna throw it in the take-up bunker. And then we'll have one more thing. Hi guys, how's everyone feeling after finishing a screening of Taxi Driver? Feel good? Feel good? Cliff?
It seems all the more relevant today than it did even 50 years ago.
Well, I think we might get into it. Maybe for my mental health, we shouldn't. But I'm so happy that Cliff Froehlich has decided to join us once more. Cliff, thank you so much for being here.
I'm pleased to be here. It's always fun visiting with the Take Up.
Very good. And Cliff, you're the former executive director of Cinema St. Louis, former editor, arts and entertainment of Riverfront Times. I mean, the list goes on. But right now, you've got this really great Substack that you're doing. Do you mind telling us and promoting that a little bit? Do you mind promoting your Substack?
No, I really object to promoting my own work. But yes, it's called Re/Views. And essentially what I'm doing is digging things out from my extensive electronic archive. I have material from essentially throughout my writing career at the Riverfront Times, St. Louis Magazine, the Post-Dispatch, and a few other places as well. And I'm refashioning some of them, representing them and giving new context to stuff that I think is potentially relevant to today's cinema. I also do occasional new reviews, and I'll indulge in things outside of cinema periodically. For example, I did a long series of posts on comic books and their relevance to my life, and that I did a review, for example, of the recent documentary on Art Spiegelman and of the recent book on Robert Crumb. And I had written about both of those men in the past, so I republished something. So it's basically old material that is also added to with some new context, and occasionally brand new work. So you can find it on Substack. Just look for my name, Cliff Froehlich, Froehlich, or Re/Views, and you can find it. It's entirely free. I don't anticipate that anybody wants to pay for my old work. So I am offering this purely for free.
Well, you did a piece about growing up in North St. Louis that was really great too. And I mean, kind of what we're doing here on this, you know, also refashioned Take Up podcast is we're talking about everyone's roots in cinema and how they got to cinephilia. And then we're building what we think of as like the pantheon of what makes the Take Up in our makeup. Take up in our makeup? Really? Did I just say that? I'm sorry. Keep that in. But so when you were posed the question of what made you a cinephile, this one jumped out first. And then you thought about some other things too. What were you reluctant to do Taxi Driver? Even though it came to your mind first.
Taxi Driver is obviously a pretty brutal film on a lot of different levels, and I don't want to be mistaken for identifying closely with Travis Bickle. Obviously, he's somebody that obviously I have a lot of fascination with, but by the same token, you don't want to necessarily holding up Taxi Driver as one of your favorite films is always a slightly problematic thing, because people have a tendency to judge you for what are you interested in? Uh, Hyper violence. I mean, these twisted, uh, psychotic character who's at the center of it. Is this really who you are? Well, no, I hope not. But by the same token, the film itself is just so powerful. And it was one of the first films, to my mind, when I was seeing it when it was first released in 1976, that seemed to bear the clear imprint of the filmmaker.
Mm, mm.
And I'm going to say himself because obviously it was literally a himself, but almost all films at the time, even then in 1976, were being made by men. But at any rate, it clearly was the work of an artist. And interestingly, I did not have the kind of references that I probably needed at the time. I was just sort of beginning my journey towards cinephilia at this juncture. I had been fascinated by movies all the way back into the my high school days. I would go see very unusual films on occasion for a high school student. I drugged my friends, for example, to see The Ruling Class, Peter O'Toole. That would have been another film that I could have potentially cited as something that sort of set me off on my journey. I
So,
took
how
my
did your
friends to
other
see.
high school friends take the ruling class?
Actually, they thought it was quite funny, as they should, because
Yeah, yeah.
it's a very funny movie. But by the same token, it's not something that we would have typically probably chosen to go to if we had taken a democratic vote and said, "What film out there do we want to go see this evening?" I persuaded them, I think, to take a chance on the ruling class. Also, drug them to Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, another Scorsese film that is not what you would call typical male adolescent fare. And they again embraced it to their credit. They did not flinch from the notion of going to see what's termed even today a woman's film, and they enjoyed it. Uh, but so I was already seeing films that I think were probably a little outside the norm for a typical high schooler. And by the time I get into college, I began to take a much more serious interest in movies just generally. And part of this was bound up with my interest in reading. I saw
Oh,
Taxi
wow.
Driver in, I think, March, and I saw All the President's Men in April. Um, I could have chosen either of those two films, and probably All the President's Men on some levels on a personal front was even more important because again it was my first review. It really did sort of solidify on some levels this lunatic notion that I wanted to become a film critic. I mean, it was absurd on its face, and I still find it almost
Lunatic
baffling.
notion. Wow. So this is like a shared delusion that we all have, right?
It was much tougher in the mid to late 1970s because obviously there was no internet, and you had to find a publication that was willing to sign off on you being a supposed expert in this and give you a forum and potentially even pay you, even more outlandish. So it took a while, but uh, eventually that did happen. I ended up starting my reviewing career with the Riverfront Times in 1983 as a freelancer, earning a big $30 a week.
Woo!
However many films I wrote about, I got $30 no matter what. Uh, but at any rate, it was that sort of period, 1976, when things really began to solidify, and this is something I wanted to do. But again, as I said, I didn't have the reference points that I probably needed to really place Taxi Driver correctly in film history because I had not seen The Searchers at that point. I had not seen any Bresson. I had not seen any Jean-Luc Godard. There's a whole range of references in the film that I was unfamiliar with. And I may have been reading about them, beginning to read about them in certain places, but I hadn't experienced them. The Tivoli didn't become a going concern until the middle of 1977. And it's at that point where my true film education began. I ended up going faithfully to the Tivoli 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a week, seeing as many as 8, 9 movies through the course of most weeks. during most of my latter days of college and through graduate school. Because it was the heyday of repertory cinema, I was able to see a lot of stuff on the big screen, albeit in 16 millimeter. All films that were shown at the Tivoli were shown on 16 millimeter during those early years. It wasn't shown on 35.
Yeah, but
Um,
I
and
bet
then
Taxi Driver lends itself well to a grainy, scratched up, nasty little copy on 16 millimeter.
no doubt it would. Although I saw Taxi Driver in a proper theater.
How did you see Taxi Driver first? Were you also an impressionable young sort?
Yeah, I want to say that I saw it the right way for a Gen Xer in the early to mid 90s, which is on a VHS cassette in somebody else's dorm room, right?
Did you have this cinematic context that Cliff's talking about? The Bresson, the John
No,
Ford, all of that?
definitely not the time.
I didn't really.
As we talked about last week, I feel like my early cinematic awakening happened in the 90s, but it was around contemporary filmmakers who were making movies at that time. So it was things like Quentin Tarantino, Gus Van Sant. Um, the filmmakers who were sort of breaking out at that time were the ones who sort of electrified me. And then my cinephilia had to go backwards. But Taxi Driver, as Cliff has suggested, Taxi Driver has this certainly has this mystique about it, particularly if you're a 20-something budding cinephile, male budding cinephile. It has a certain mystique about it. But as he also says, it also has this slightly weird aura about it, where you look askance if somebody says their favorite movie is Taxi Driver, even though the film I do believe is legitimately great. It's the same, you don't go around saying your favorite novel is Lolita, even though Lolita is a masterful novel that there's a lot of reasons to love, because just people tend to look at it a little askance. And I think Taxi Driver has, I don't know if it was that way in the 1970s, but it certainly evolved into that place in 2025, I think.
Well, Cliff, I want to ask you about that. Is like, what did it look like in 1976? How did it feel? You talk about it bearing the unmistakable mark of an auteur. And, Scorsese had already made a few features before this. You reference Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which I'll tell you, as a little mama's boy, that one was my kind of fare. But Taxi Driver being, it seems like it must have been seismic. I mean, it won the Palme d'Or then, in that year, and was critically appreciated. But I'm just wondering, I'm coming from a time where Taxi Driver is this kind of untouchable object, right? And influences filmmakers, generations of filmmakers, more often than not to their detriment. But I'm wondering, what is the impression that it made really in 76 on you?
Well, it was something that was sort of shook me on some levels. I remember seeing it at the Westport Plaza. It was exclusively at Westport Plaza. I went with a friend of mine, Pat Bexinis. We went. We had probably read Joe Pollock's review in the Post Dispatch, and that was probably our only real knowledge of Taxi Driver as we entered. I don't think we had any significant amount of criticism that would have informed our film going at that time. But at any rate, we went, and both of us had a similar reaction sitting there. I mean, it's a mesmerizing film, particularly that last explosion of violence. And really, there isn't that much violence in the film. I had the opportunity to review the film 20 years after its initial release, when it was re-released in 1986. And I describe it as a slow build to a full boil. And it really much is that. Not much happens from the point of view of violent content. It's words, yes, that can be quite disturbing, and looks, but not actual violence. There's one incident of it until that release at the end, and it almost takes you into this almost trance-like state when he begins his stalking of all of these people in Iris's apartment building where she conducts her business, uh, beginning with sport, and then her timekeeper, the person who controls when the Johns
Fine.
come and go.
You can call him a pimp. It's fine.
Well, no, he's not the
Oh,
pimp.
yeah, you're talking about
Sport
the
is the
guy
pimp.
in the hotel. Right.
Yeah,
God. It's so weird though that always this movie is like in my memory a bunch of sort of not associated nebulous things that happen, but it is so specific. And the thing that I really like about this movie is that he wants to shoot no matter what. And it really isn't a kind of quest like being a savior. It is actually that he has this drive that he doesn't really understand, and that he's got this foiled assassination attempt against a presidential candidate. That is that is kind of an apolitical act, actually, because he's just got this association of this man with this woman who rejected him because he's stupid as fuck. But the foiled assassination attempt is what leads him to all he wants is the violence in it. And in my memory, it's so different. And maybe because I was never old enough to really understand what they were getting at in this film. And maybe I've been conditioned by the world that we live in to now fully understand it, because it's like we watch Taxi Driver every single day. But I always sort of never remember it right because it does put you in this trance-like state. Last night when I watched it, though, I was able to have a little bit of remove from it and do have questions, objections, but it is so undeniably one of the films that has this, like what Andrew was saying, this aura of hell around it. Like David Fincher's Seven, I think we were talking about, that just like you are going into the absolute pit of despair. But this film, you're kind of locked in the journey of going on it too. That in my memory, all of it sort of like maybe I'm trying to suppress it. Maybe that's why I always forget how it connects.
I often say that I like to talk about what I call the New York shitty canon,
Yes.
which I think starts with you can argue that it starts earlier, but I feel like the formal period for the New York shitty canon is 1969 to 1976. It starts arguably with Midnight Cowboy, and I think it's very fitting that it ends in my mind with Taxi Driver, which is not to say there were not movies that depicted New York City as a cesspool after Taxi Driver, but I feel like there's a definite period in there with movies like The French Connection, blaxploitation films like Shaft, Superfly, Mean Streets, another Scorsese film is in there, Serpico, Taking a Pelham, 1, 2, 3, a whole bunch of films. But I feel like Taxi Driver is both the end point and in some ways the apotheosis of that movement. Like it is the crescendo, which I think is very fitting for how the film itself is structured as a sort of crescendo. Cliff intimated that earlier that it doesn't actually have that much violence in it until that explosive final act. And I think about a lot about, I love what how Pauline Kael described the sort of atmosphere of this film, which is that doom that you feel throughout the whole movie, that something bad is going to happen. Travis is going to do something. We don't know exactly what. He's going to do something. And as you said, Josh, it starts as a political assassination that he just sort of quickly discards once it becomes obvious he's going to get caught. And then he moves on to something else. But she describes it as a relief. And there's a sense of relief or release that something has happened. We've been waiting for Travis to reach that point of boiling over. And she describes it in those almost sexual terms, that he needs.
Of course she does.
The dynamic between him and the city is so intense that at some point it's going to have to explode, and we're just waiting for that moment to happen. And even even then, when it comes, it is surprising in how violent and explosive it is.
And then, of course, one of the things about Taxi Driver that continually strikes me is, and it very much was a part of my initial experience, is the way in which then it promises that this cycle is going to repeat. Uh, Somewhat miraculously, obviously, uh, Travis survives that apocalyptic gun battle, and we see him at the end uh, with the same darting eyes, the same sort of paranoid mindset seems to be reasserting itself at the conclusion of the film, even though he appears superficially to have become more normal. It seems the eyes give it away. The eyes are hugely important in Taxi Driver throughout. It starts with Travis's eyes in the opening titles, and it ends with them as well. It's an endless cycle of violence. It's gonna erupt again and again and again. The ending of Taxi Driver is particularly striking to me because I thought that it had ended during that pullback out into the street, and you see all the people gathering with the cops, and it's all slow-mo, and I thought that was going to be the end of the film. And then instead we cut to the hospital room, and the pan across all of the newspaper clippings and the letter from Iris's parents, and then we're back on in with Travis and his cohorts with the other taxi drivers, and Betsy re-enters the picture, and they have a dialogue. Uh, and both of it was just so striking to me. It's like there's these three separate endings. Essentially, you could have stopped at any one point, and it would have been sufficient. But it just keeps a going on some levels,
Well,
and that particularly struck me when I was watching the movie for the first time.
that circular narrative is really interesting because it does have this like it's a the halves mirror each other but also return upon himself. So he's got the woman for the first really 20 minutes of the movie, and then Iris becomes the sort of fetish object where he's trying to save her, but then it doubles back on itself. Is like the two, you all know we covered Rolling Thunder. I talked shit about Paul Schrader. I will continue to talk shit about Paul Schrader. But that structure is so, it's the film to me. It's why anything in this film works is because of that kind of circular narrative and the implicit continuation of it. And maybe it starts building on itself afterward. I did read something about Bob De Niro wanting to make a sequel, and Scorsese and Schrader being like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Like the movie is its own sequel. But that really struck me this time as the way it kind of not only doubles upon itself, but also it has this continuum within it.
That honestly is one of the reasons I've never really bought the Searcher comparison, is because Travis is not, he's obsessed, but he's not single-minded in terms of his what's the word? He's so easily distractible. It's like, oh, Betsy isn't working out. Well, I'll turn my attentions on this little girl that I need to save. Oh, that's been resolved. Like he, and this I think is one of the tricky parts about point of view, protagonist, putting our point of view of protagonist into somebody who's obviously mentally ill, mentally unwell, is we never really get any insight into what makes Travis tick in a kind of essentialist way. It's really about that portraiture, about putting us into this disturbing point of view and making us sit uncomfortably with it for a couple hours and realize just how far off the rails this guy is and has always been. I think Ebert in his review Cliff was talking about Travis's eyes, and that the eye acting from De Niro, and this is so incredible, particularly like watching his eyes flick around as other people are talking, I think is a fascinating way to watch this film. Ebert talked about how he thought Bickle's face and expressions and eye movements reminded him a lot of George Wallace's attempted assassin, Arthur Bremer, which I think is an interesting real world comp. But yeah, like there's something. It doesn't strike me as like a pure. A lot of people have brought up the Searchers over the years in the wake of this film, and it doesn't strike me as a one-to-one comparison because Travis is so easily diverted to another target after, both in terms of Betsy to Iris, but also political assassination to pimp slaying.
I,
Well, they're both obviously Ethan Edwards and Travis Bickle are obsessives of both obsessives of a kind. It's just that Ethan is totally singular in his focus on his niece, whereas Travis, as you say, is distractible and able to move from one object to another when he's unable to get satisfaction in one area. He moves to another. He's got some bad stuff in his head, and he needs to let it out. He has to have this release, and it doesn't ultimately make any difference what that release is. It just has to come out.
I think that the
So
motivation
yes, I do
actually,
think there is a parallel with it.
I think the motivation is actually sort of the same, and that these are two people who feel as if they're owed something. Now, Ethan, the way he asserts his power is by taking his niece back, by acting as savior, right? Or what he thinks that he's going to do is, it is kind of the same act as Travis in Taxi Driver, but Travis's sort of lack of focus is certainly a more modern take on it, on the kind of crazed world that it is, and the simplicity of the Searchers does it does in stark it is in stark contrast to the world of New York City in Taxi Driver. But the original script has these characters who meet their end because of Travis. It's all more racially motivated. And Columbia and Schrader and Scorsese, I mean, they're all looking at changing those things because Scorsese wants to give Harvey Keitel a role. And Columbia is a little nervous about the racial ideas in it. Like, can you have a racist in the center of this film? And to get back to our earlier episode with Cliff, this is something Tarantino writes a lot about in Cinema Speculation. So there's a good chapter on why he thinks Taxi Driver is sort of less interesting than it could have been in its original script. And I'm wondering, I want to pose a question to the two of you, first to Cliff, about this idea, this cultural identification, this holding up as Travis Bickle as a hero, not only in the end of the film, but also outside of the film, and the kind of like Fight Club fallacy and or Scarface fallacy, and people misreading a film and taking the anti-hero as a hero figure. What do you think about that? And what do you think about the legacy of Taxi Driver from that?
Well, first of all, I think you're absolutely correct that and Tarantino's correct too, that the film is actually, if you can call Taxi Driver in any way, diluted. The racism in the film is quite evident, and Travis is clearly a racist, and he demonstrates that on several different occasions through his looks, the way in which he views black people throughout the film is always as some sort of other, some sort of enemy, somebody to be feared, to be potentially hunted. So, there would have been a logic, first of all, to having Sport be black and him being the victim of Travis. And I think it would have made it even more stark then that there's not much to admire, if anything, in Travis. But the conclusion of the film does heroicize him in the sense that the media makes him out to be a hero because he kills reprehensible people. A gangster who happens to be the person who's in the room with Iris at the time, a pimp, and his cohort Those people are not folks that anybody's going to cry tears over when they're killed. On the other hand, if he had been successful in his original intent to kill Palatine, the candidate, he would have not been heroicized. He would have been condemned in the strongest of possible terms. So there's tons of irony in
Yeah,
this
the irony is
heroicization
incredible.
uh, within the film. Within the film, I mean, it's commenting on it in a very you know uh, a subtle fashion. It's not holding up Travis as a hero. It's, I think, critiquing the media and the larger popular culture in the way in which we embrace some forms of killers and condemn others. Um, but in the same way, I mean, we had real world examples, obviously, in the same way that Travis was partially inspired by a figure that Andrew already cited, Arthur Bremer, who shot George Wallace after first focusing on Richard Nixon and realizing that it was going to be too difficult to get to him, but he could get to Nixon. Uh, the diary that he kept is actually the partial inspiration for the diary that Travis keeps. Then subsequently, John Hinckley, of course, is inspired by a taxi driver to shoot Ronald Reagan in order to get the attention of Jodie Foster. And one of the motivations that Bremer had was to just sort of look at me. I am someone of note. You should be paying attention to me. He was very much seeking attention. Um, Hinckley was also seeking attention from a very specific source in this case, Jodie Foster. No one, it seems to me, can look at any of those figures, whether it be the real life people, the one who inspired Travis Bickle, or John Hinckley, who was in turn inspired by Travis Bickle, as heroes. No one should find anything in their actions to admire. But in the case, again, of Travis, he is admired in a really bizarre way because he chooses the right victims. He doesn't even
Yeah.
choose them. They're just
Yeah,
sort of
that's
thrust on him. They move into his field of view. And he, in that sense, gets lucky. But yeah, I mean, I think it's appalling that anybody would hold up any of these folks as heroes in the same way that, the guy who killed the healthcare CEO is held up by some people as a hero. Well, no, he is not. uh, he may have targeted somebody that you personally find distasteful, but killing him is not a solution to anything. Again, that's why I think Taxi Driver continues to speak to the present moment in fascinating ways. I also just watched, I'm going to be doing Nashville. I'm going to be speaking on Nashville on Wednesday at the High Point, another film that deals with assassination. And it also has eerie parallels and echoes to the present day. So I
yeah.
don't think it speaks well for the culture that anybody would embrace Travis Bickle as a hero. I think he's being held up for critique. And also, we're supposed to be understanding to some degree the pathology that created him. Andrew correctly says that we don't receive enough of backstory to really say definitively why he is the way he is. But certainly his inability to integrate himself into society, to interact in a normal way, put it in quotes, with the people he encounters, it has created this frustration within him. He wants to be a person like other people. He says so in the film, and he strives on some levels to do that in his pursuit of Betsy. But he's self-sabotaging. His own life is so narrow and focused that the only thing he can think to bring her to is a porn movie. Now, a semi-respectable porn movie Oh, I see lots of couples here.
He wasn't wrong that in 1976 it was a little different, that couples could gotta go to these things, but it's a
Yeah,
wild
the
first. It is a
first
wild
date.
first date. It is a wild
First
first date.
date,
Yeah,
a pseudo doc on
yeah.
population. Andrew, so on that subject, Andrew, this might be a leading question, but I am really curious if you think the filmmaking and the choices of ambiguity and backstory or Scorsese's presentational manner, do you think it makes Travis sexy or an attractive figure? And I don't mean that in a, sexual way, but like, as he's rocking a TV back and kicks the thing over without any reaction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so, but I mean, is 20-something Robert De Niro an attractive looking guy? Yes, but I guess the way that the film presents Travis to me is always felt so self-evidently scumbaggy. And maybe this is just like my bougie background piece here. I guess he doesn't look like somebody whose life you would want. I think the admiration for him more comes from, this sort of knee-jerk um way that a certain segment of cinephiles hold up anybody who sort of breaks through the system, whatever, however you define the system, and that's the convenient way that any film can define the system, capital S. In the same way, like you brought up Fight Club, and I think it has a sort of Scarface. I think it has a similar. We love a rebel. We love an anti-hero, and even when it's really clearly not an anti-hero, it's an obviously villainous protagonist. It's like that's one thing that always sort of chafes my hide. Is everybody says, "Oh, I love an anti-hero." Well, Tony Soprano and Walter White and Tyler Durden aren't anti-heroes. They're villainous protagonists. There's a difference. And I think I don't know. I've never really viewed Travis as being a particular, like Scarface. You can at least, because of his lifestyle, you can at least understand why Tony Montana would be like uh, idolized by a certain kind of guy. But I've never really understood the admiration for Travis as a kind of, other than the sort of like people identify with the alienation, which I do think I want to emphasize. I do think is an important part of what makes this film really successful. Is an important New York City movie, an important like urban film in general, is the way it captures that sense of alienation. And part of that is technique. It's the Herman score. It's uh, the editing. It's the way that Scorsese, like you were saying earlier, Josh. A lot of this feels like vignettes, sort of stitched together, and until the momentum starts to pick up later in the film. And I think it does get a lot more relentless and more narrative driven. But early on, it definitely has a sort of here's the night and here's the city and here are the things that are happening in this dirty city feel to it, which I think is important to setting the mood and setting us into Travis's mindset, that feeling of being sort of alone and lost and not having a purpose in this horrible, giant, sprawling, anonymizing space, which is very powerful. Whatever you think about it politically or socially, I think it's undeniable that the film does a spectacular job of evoking that, I think.
Yeah, although, and it certainly does, although I would say that in Travis's case, whether he were placed within the city, New York City or some other urban environment, or in some sort of country locale, his psychological issues are going to manifest in some fashion. He's profoundly alienated and unable to integrate himself in society, no matter where he finds himself, I suspect. But yes, I mean, the city plays a massive role in the film. It's, I had not been to New York City at that point, and I certainly would not have necessarily thought, oh boy, this is a place I want to go after
Right.
watching.
This is not sanctioned by New York City Tourism Board.
No, although of course you had the sort of romanticized view of New York being also given to us through other films of the same time period, things like Annie Hall and Manhattan. But at any rate, yes, and Andrew, to your point too, no one would wish the life of Travis on themselves. Oh, yes, we all want to consume brandy, sugar, white bread, and milk as a little treat.
I don't know. Sounds kind of good, guys. Is that what that is? Is that what he's eating? I was looking in the bed and wondering, what is he pouring on that? Yes,
that is
white.
classic poverty food, right? Is what that is right there. That is,
Wow.
that is brutal to see it on screen. But you want to talk about all the brutal things that happen in terms of violence? Just the cuisine is really what's. But to your question, Josh, larger question, is he originally opposed it to Cliff? I do think I'm always of two minds about it. On the one hand, I think that anybody who reads Taxi Driver or Fight Club or Falling Down or Scarface or whatever, or Breaking Bad as a sort of a portrait of somebody we should be admiring and emulating has already got problems that I can't help them with. Like, you have problems, and the problems have nothing to do with the movies that you're watching. It has to do with you and your value system. I don't think it's a filmmaker's responsibility to pose admirable heroes and characters to us all the time. We're not in the Hays Code anymore. But I do think that it's obviously fair as critics to look at a film like Taxi Driver and critique the presentation, to critique the way that the character is being presented. Like, did we do this in a way that makes it clear what the filmmaker's intent is? Do we do this in a way that is the ambiguity itself the point? I do want to bring up that when I first saw this film as a impressionable 20 something, I 100% thought that Dakota was a dream, like an imagination dream state afterlife.
Put a pin in it. Put a pin in it. Put a pin in it, because that is my ultimate question. But to your point, Andrew, I don't know. There's something about this film that I can talk myself in circles about. It slides off of me. It is also sort of perfected, and I appreciate it for everything that it's doing. But I also wonder, to bring up Scarface, I sort of tend towards a more satirical vision of the anti-hero in Brian De Palma, and who was tipped to do this at one point. And I have a great affinity for his exclamation point filmmaking, where Scorsese's more of a sensualist. And that, I think, is where I slip off of it a little bit, in Scorsese's technique, that I think works really well in Goodfellas and Casino, Wolf of Wall Street. And I don't know. There's something about the technique here that I slip off of. And I think about a film that I think this approaches, Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer.
Ooh, yeah.
And the way that these two films have me enter their visions of hell, and I feel, while I'm watching them, completely unsafe. And that is skill. That takes a great filmmakers doing very skillful things. Although I guess we could all argue about John McNaughton being a great filmmaker. Wild Things, though, man. 2 thumbs up.
I'll go to bat. Sometimes people have one masterpiece in them, and I think that's Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer for him.
But that film has a great distance to its filmmaking that I'm like peering around corners watching them watch their own murders, and has that kind of, metatextual stuff going on. It's fascinating to me, the struggle I have with it. Like, even the struggle with it is a part of Taxi Driver, right? That's a part of its legacy, is this great struggle with it, because it's not a film that, even in us talking about the dilution of the issues of race, and I think the ambiguity actually is to its credit. Now, how I read it and how I'll read it in 5 years if we're still around, because we have a lot of Travis Bickles around. Man, now I'm depressed and I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know. Clip, say something cool.
I think it's worth pointing out, it's not like the idea of a reprehensible protagonist was new, right? We have
Right.
Psycho, we have Peeping Tom, like this
The
is
original
not,
Scarface. Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
We have the pre-code gangster films, like we have people who are vile being leads in movies. I think part of it is just the new Hollywood technique informed by the new wave, right? That puts us in this sensory. I like the way you called him a sensualist, because I think of how, the beginning of this film and the way that taxi slides out of the darkness, wreathed in fog. There's something infernal about it, right?
Herman's music.
And Herman music starts, and we have these gliding. I like the way that the movement of the film often has that sort of, even when we're not in the car per se, the movement of the film has that sort of car gliding slowly along a street, side feeling to it. It reminds me of, you mentioned Casino. The opening of Casino, I think, has that sort of same scene setting. But I don't know, like, it's not Scorsese's responsibility to hold people's hands and tell them how to feel about a character. They have to come to their own conclusions. And I think it's perfectly fair to say, I'm just not gelling with this. It is not one of my favorite Scorsese films, I will say. It isn't one of my favorite Schrader scripts either. Like, it's not a top 5 film for me. I much prefer, if we're going to talk early Scorsese, I much prefer Mean Streets, but maybe that's just my, I don't know, something about the Catholic angst of
I was
Mean
going to say that's your Catholicism coming out.
But I'm not Catholic, so that's really weird. But
No,
I love the Catholic angst and the male. Travis is so isolated, and for me, like, there's something fascinating about a character portrait of an isolated character, right? And the way he bounces off all the people he tries to and fails to interact with like a normal human being. But I think for me, ultimately, I prefer character, right? Character to character relationships, and that's why the interpersonal, masculine friendships that are the center of Mean Streets are so important to me. I think in the canon of Scorsese, I rank it a bit higher.
I'm a Cape Fear boy.
You're a psychosexual nastiness. You're the Brian De Palma Martin Scorsese movie.
Ooh, ooh. Can we talk about the ending though? Is it immature for as a film reader for me to question whether or not that is reality?
I mean, like
dream
I said,
is it?
Yeah, it's his dying dream. Are we in a Jacob's Ladder situation here? What is this?
There's just it's that he does the ideal thing, the cool guy thing, finally, and that she kind of alludes to them getting together again or something, and he just doesn't charge her for the ride.
Not today, babe.
Yeah. And drives off into the smoke and nastiness. But then there's that kind of the eyes again, Cliff, into the rear view mirror, and the sting of Herman's score that makes you think, okay, cracking back into reality, or something like thunderbolt of lightning or whatever, like breaks the film again, and it's kind of like mirroring Psyche or something. But it doesn't really play as like, to bring it back to De Palma, the end of Carrie or the end of Dressed to Kill, to where it's like it is explicitly a dream, which I guess is to its credit.
Yeah, I've never particularly bought into the notion that those last two scenes are dreams, a dying dream of Travis in which he's somehow seeing himself for the first time as he, in an idealized way, as he'd like to be seen as this hero. I've never thought that was the case. I mean, it's a really weird dream, first of all, to have a sequence in which have a letter from Iris's parents, played, of course, by in the photo by Scorsese's own parents, who are an inappropriate age to have a daughter who's 12.
Right.
So that's kind of dreamlike. But I mean, it will be a very strange kind of presentation to indicate that this is a dream that he is having. But one way or the other, I think the ultimate clue that it isn't, that this is the reality, however heightened you want to, none of this is real. I mean, let's face it, even if you regard Travis as a hero, I think there might have been some questioning as to where he got all those fucking guns, what he was doing stalking these people. I don't think that he would have just slid out of that without any particular repercussions or any sort of investigation taking place. So it's not reality as we live it, probably, but we are forgiving of people who save 12-year-old girls from prostitution, so maybe. But at any rate, uh, I think that movement at the end, where it's indicating that Travis is still not well, that
Not well.
there's the inevitability of another incident of this kind taking place, and it's just a matter of enough time passing and accumulating frustrations uh before he has another explosion. So I don't find that a particularly a dream that anybody would want to have about themselves. So I think that I've read any number of articles, and I've certainly had students when I've taught Taxi Driver who have proposed that as a solution to why this occurs at the conclusion. But I've never really bought into it.
Yeah, I doubt that was definitely my reaction when I first encountered the film, was like, oh, this is his dying dream. It's just a little too pat and a little too nailed down. But I've maybe softened into a more, it's ambiguous. We don't really like the whole tone of that final coda is pretty unreal in a lot of ways, and I don't really feel like there's a definite reading of it in the text for me personally. As I've grown older and more cynical, I really like um the reading of it that emphasizes the irony of it, right? That the line between hero and villain is very thin. The line between who the media holds up as heroic and who the media holds up as villainous is very thin and can hinge on something as the whims of a madman deciding whether or not he's going to go through with plan A or switch to plan B. Like that bite for me into 2025, the age I am now, bites a lot harder, I think. But I'm not sure how I've ever really bought early Scorsese as satirical, and it's caused me to sort of reevaluate. Was he being a lot more satirical earlier on, and I just didn't see it? So, like all great films, I feel like it's a film. However you feel about it, I feel like it's a film that rewards rewatching. Every time I've seen it, feel like I've seen something different in it, which I think is a good metric for something that's has a lot of layers to it.
All right. Well, I think we've come to the point where we need to vote. Andrew and I, so this is the thing, Cliff. We get to decide whether or not we're going to take Taxi Driver and keep it forever. All right. We have 5 votes left each because we both agreed that Far From Heaven and No Country for Old Men, our respective picks, would go into the bunker. For the film, I will put Cliff Froehlich, I will take you by the hand and put you in the bunker yourself. But I'm gonna save my votes. I'm not voting for Taxi Driver to go in.
Andrew, oh, really?
It is on you.
I feel like it's a little heretical not to include a cinematic canon film like this.
If you do it, you'll have 4 votes left for the rest of the year, and it is September 14th.
That's enough time.
I'm not arguing against Taxi Driver going in. I've said that I respect it. So
I'm gonna vote for it just because I think its influence is so outsized. It digests so many influences and then itself became so influential. I feel like it's an undeniable film, if that makes sense. Let's call it an
Yeah.
undeniable film.
My not voting for it really has less to do with it and has more to do with strategy, because I knew you wouldn't be able to not do it.
Wow. Harsh.
So he gets to
Harsh.
keep his vote.
No, I don't think so. No. So here's the thing is that Cliff's a member of the fam. So if he wants to put it in the bunker, he gets to put it in the bunker no matter what. So Cliff, you get a vote. Are you gonna put
Well,
it in?
I'm happy to put it in the bunker. However, that wasn't the reason why I chose it. I was
Sure.
asked to pick a film that sort of solidified my cinephilia, and that was the film that, in my personal experience, sort of tipped me over the edge and made me into somebody who wanted to think deeply about and ultimately write about movies. And that's the reason why I chose it. But yes, I think it's a remarkable movie. It also is not my favorite Scorsese film.
What is
They're
your
probably
Scorsese? Which one is it?
uh,
You got put on the spot.
probably Goodfellas, Fellas. But I'm also a big fan of Mean Streets, I think, and I am a permanently lapsed Catholic, so the Catholicism of Mean Streets certainly speaks directly to me. But I also like a lot of other Scorsese. I'm a big fan of the Wolf of Wall Street. I think from a latter day Scorsese point of view, I think it's a terrific film. So there's a lot of movies that I might, and I also I am an actual fan of Cape Fear. I think it's part of the Scorsese's
That scans. That scans.
films about marriage. I think it's part of his films about marriage. There's a whole array of movies that can be read through that lens that Scorsese has produced that I think are pretty fascinating. But anyway, yes, it's an amazing movie on so many different fronts. One last note about why I think it's so amazing, and that is the way in which he takes these various diverse influences, not just specific films and filmmakers, but also there's a documentary quality to Taxi Driver, and yet there's also this immense amount of expressionism, which Andrew correctly noted, and there's these moments of actual abstraction, the way in which he distorts what Travis is seeing, that becomes just these neon washes of colors. Michael Chapman's cinematography is absolutely remarkable. I just find the film contains so much, and the way in which he chooses to present the material is so consistently fascinating and interesting to me. I remember seeing that subtle track from Travis on the phone being rejected by Betsy to the empty
The hallway.
hallway.
Yeah. Scorsese's favorite
thinking,
shot, allegedly.
well, I when I saw it, I thought, oh my fucking God, this is an extraordinary decision because it so encapsulates the emptiness that he is feeling and the emptiness of his life. Uh, I thought, what a brilliant choice, and one that I would have never thought of myself. That happens throughout the way in which he, at certain points, will where he's in his room and practicing with the gun, and he says a line, and then it backs up and says the line again. That editing choice, he does that also in the other film with Stephen Prince, who plays the gun dealer in Taxi Driver, American Boy. He does that a couple of times in that, where he actually asks Prince to sort of tell the same story again, more dramatically. There is this meta aspect to Taxi Driver that I find fascinating. So anyway, I think there's so many incredible elements to this, not to mention performance. I don't think that obviously De Niro gets uh, many people praise his performance, but I think that straight down the line, it's pretty extraordinary, including, and this is a person who never gets sufficient credit in my estimation. That's Sybil Shepherd.
Together, Sybil Shepherd.
Yeah, she's so good. She's so good at conveying this woman who is like, her early scenes with Albert Brooks are so good at conveying how whip smart she is, and this may be, even though it's a relatively small role for her compared to other stuff that she's been in, it feels like one of her most essential roles to getting what's great about her as an actress, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I think she never gets enough credit for what she's doing because she's pretty much always playing someone who isn't likable, and that's kind of her thing. And you know,
The slightly
out of
unattainable, cool blonde
yeah,
thing that sort of attends to all of her roles. I think the thing that I really appreciated on this viewing was the production design detail and the details of performance that uh, speak about the time and place. I mean, like again, it's an expressionist film in some ways, as you indicated, Cliff, in terms of its style, but I was tracking like the little details about what people are eating and drinking and the production design in Travis's apartment and little details of performance that I never really noticed, like Travis taking his tip box with him, his cigar tip box with him when he leaves the cab and goes into a place like the record store or a bodega. He carries his clipboard with his log and his cigar box with his cash in it under his arm, which I think is a lovely little detail. It's things like that that you don't necessarily, you have to see a movie 3 or 4 times before you notice things like that. It's great.
well, because Cliff, of course, votes for it, and then Andrew voted for it. That means that you cancel each other out. Andrew, you still get your 5 votes. You know, eventually this is going to come into effect. Eventually, because I think next week we're going to be doing a new release. So who knows what the hell's going to happen? Who knows? But all right, Cliff, thank you so much for joining us again. Will you please tell us about your Substack one more time, and if you have anything else going on you want to promote?
Sure. Again, the Substack is called re/views. Very clever. In which I uh, have a tendency to usually republish old material, but give it new context. And I try and select old material that I think has some degree of relevancy to something that's taking place in contemporary terms. Uh, and you can find it on Substack. Look for my name or re/views, and it's entirely free. And if anybody's at loose ends on Wednesday afternoon, this upcoming week, as I said, I'm going to be doing a discussion. I'm going to intro and then discuss Robert Altman's Nashville, which I just rewatched last night, and it is an absolute astonishment.
It's only the greatest
Okay,
movie ever made.
okay, Pauline.
I am a Paulette. I'm a Paulette. I gotta say it. But yes, Cliff, if anyone has the opportunity the day this goes up on Wednesday, go over to the High Point and see Cliff talk about, no pressure, Cliff, but a very important film. That is also
I am, by the way,
fucking enjoyable.
The thing about
I am, by the way, doing a series of these films of the 1970s, one Wednesday each month through December. So if you can't make Nashville, October's film is one that will be near and dear to both Andrew and Josh's hearts, and that is Brian De Palma's Carrie.
Ooh.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. So, well, I will definitely be trying to. Well, it sounds like, Cliff, are you just going through my favorite movies? That's okay. It's okay. All right. Thank you so much, Cliff. I hope we will see you around again on the Take Up podcast in the near future. All right, Andrew, we've got one more thing. I went last time. Why did I say that like that? Andrew, we've got one more thing. It is my turn to go first.
Okay.
While he scrubs his little memory bank to figure out, now that we're doing this bi-weekly, I'm like, wait, I'm still doing the same thing that I was doing last week. I'm still listening to Big Thief. Can I recommend Toast?
Toast?
Dude, it's not like I'm broke or anything, but don't you think Toast is really good? Might have had 6 pieces of toast just yesterday.
Okay, I need to know if we're gonna do toast as a
Toast
thing.
time. Yeah, toast time.
What goes on the toast?
Do you know what the best toast is?
What?
Sandwich white bread,
Ooh,
butter.
really? Why not just stick a sponge in your toaster if you're gonna do that? Jesus Christ.
Okay, I fucking will. So that's my one more thing for the week is fucking sponge in the fucking toaster.
No, white bread with real butter or
With
margarine.
real, like, I mean, I don't really care if it's margarine or butter. I grew up in West Plains, Missouri. I don't know the difference. I'm sure that my palate has refined to the point that it does matter, but yeah, I guess it's toast. I've also watched caught up with the films of Zhao Zhangke, the Chinese filmmaker, and I teased it or recommended it to people. But his latest film, Caught by the Tides, is really great. It's on the Criterion Channel.
Is it? Were you catching up because you wanted to catch up, or you were catching up so you could catch all the references and
Exactly.
allusions?
No,
in
I did,
Top of
but
the Tide?
as it turns out, you don't. I did all of that and tortured myself and watched all of his films just to get there. No, as it turns out, it's more interesting as an exercise to do all of that than it is required by Caught by the Tides. Caught by the Tides uses footage from the past 20 years of his filmmaking, some that were in films like Still Life and 24 City and I think it
I
uses
feel like
the
he's always been a little
platform
bit. He's always been a little bit meta, right? Like all of his
a little
films.
bit. Yeah, yeah. They're always sort of dipping their toes into documentary and blurring the lines between fiction and nonfiction. But this one does the same thing, and it follows two people who are separated by time and meet over three eras in Chinese culture or in modern contemporary China. And so you're sort of not only are you watching his filmmaking develop, you're watching his filmmaking develop, you're watching uh, Chinese culture, Chinese politics develop as well. I have some problems with the sort of construction of it. I think it's an interesting watch to see how you sort of respond to what it's after in trying to construct. It's not trying to do something like Mulholland Drive does in salvaging a pilot episode to make another of the greatest movie of all time, but it's doing something metatextual with that. And I'm interested, viewers, hit me up if you end up, viewers, listeners, hit me up if you end up watching it and let me know what you think about its construction because I'm really, really interested in it. But that's Toast on the Criterion Channel. But you can find me at OK Josh Ray on Letterboxd and Instagram, and you can find our social media at the Take Up STL on pretty much everything. What about you, Andrew?
Um, so I have Stephen King on the mind. I went and saw The Long Walk on Friday. Good film.
Yes, agreed.
But
You
I
know,
also rewatched Christine last night. I was kind of feeling a little bit Stephen King pilled right now, so kind of jumping around. I know
can
you love Christine, Josh.
can we do a little bit of inside baseball?
Yeah.
Can instead of covering what we were going to cover, can we do the long walk on the next episode?
Yeah, we could if you want. Yeah.
I do want because I want to talk about it.
Okay. Well,
You about to recommend the long walk?
No, I'm about to recommend a different Stephen King work.
Okay, go
just
ahead.
because so we can circle back to The Long Walk and its place and talk more broadly about Stephen King next week. But so this will serve as a good aperitif. I'm specifically going to recommend a film. So Christine had me thinking about his other quote unquote car novel, which is from a Buick 8, which is I don't know if I've brought it up on the pod before, but I think I've mentioned in some of my writing that it's one of my favorite sort of late model Stephen King. And by late model, I mean 21st century. I think like a lot of people my age, I read Stephen King was a very formative sort of pulp top writer for me early when I was discovering horror, reading novels way too young that I should not have read when I was, 10 years old or whatever. But I haven't really kept up with his output in the 21st century the way I should. The exception being his 2002 novel From a Buick 8, which I think people sort of view as, oh, it's that other novel about a car, right? Did he just rewrite Christine? And I think the one of the more remarkable things about the novel is that it's not a retread of Christine at all. In fact, it's a completely different subgenre of horror, where the car fills an entirely different role. Um, so without going too much into spoiler territory, and just focus on the things, one of the reasons I love the novel is it's maybe the closest King has ever come to writing a straight up Lovecraftian cosmic horror novel. Um, the print, the plot, and it does exactly what I think is plays to what King's strengths are, which is he's very good at creating a core group of evocative characters, letting them bounce off each other, painting them into a sort of a predictable or familiar milieu. In this case, his characters are all Pennsylvania state troopers working out at the same sort of rural substation in the middle of nowhere, rural Pennsylvania. And so they're highway patrolmen, they're a dispatcher, they're the people, half a dozen people or so, whatever, who all work out of this station. And they encounter a car, a vintage Buick 8, that appears to have some kind of terrifying connection to some otherworldly place, something that is nothing like Earth, nothing like our dimension, nothing like our reality. The car almost acts like a gateway. I won't explain the particulars of the plot, but what I love about the novel is that King approaches it from an utterly realistic perspective. He isn't trying to go for high style. He's saying, what would happen if a group of half a dozen Pennsylvania state troopers found a literal door to a realm of complete cosmic horror? How would they react to it? How would they approach it? And he sort of positions these personalities and these people in a way that makes it seem 100% credible. They absolutely, unlike every other, so many horror movies and horror novels, we're constantly going, why are you doing that? No. Oh, this person is behaving in an unrealistic way. They're too cowardly or they're too super heroic. He's just taking some regular dudes and dropping them into a place of unfathomable, incomprehensible horror and seeing how they react in a realistic way. And it's something we very rarely see. It's a very satisfying read. A lot of stuff about fathers and sons, a lot of stuff about how we deal with horrifying trauma that we can't really wrap our mind around. Just an excellent.
I wasn't not listening when I was turned around. My books are behind me, and I was seeing if I have a copy of it because I'm interested in reading it. I've always understood that it's one of his better later ones. Is it under the pseudonym? Is it under Bachman?
No. This is long after he had abandoned the Bachman pseudonym. No, this is a 2002 novel. I'm not exactly sure when it was written. I think maybe written in the late 90s. It's one of his novels that I've returned to a couple times that I really admire. And I don't have enough experience with his other 21st century output to make any high recommendations there. But just because I was thinking of it after watching Christine again, or being reminded how cool Christine is, it's like, oh yeah, he has another car novel, but it's so vastly different from Christine. But highly recommended.
What about his truck movie?
Maximum Overdrive. The cocaine binge.
Oh, he was so high. He was so high. Steven, are you okay?
So rewatching Christine last night, my friends and I were asking, why has this not been remade yet? So why do you think? Is it because the original is so clearly having an unimpeachable original does not stop people from remaking movies? So why hasn't Christine been remade yet?
Do you know who expressed interest in a Christine remake?
Who?
Brian Fuller.
Oh.
I don't think that happens. Brian Fuller is a man who loves the attaches and quickly abandons things.
Yeah, he's got so many things in development.
Right. But there is no way that Christine isn't on her way. again. Christine will return. But I don't need anyone to, but somebody's going to do it. Because I absolutely love, I think John Carpenter's Christine is a really underrated film.
Yeah, I was really impressed with it revisiting it. So maybe this is a dual recommendation. Read From BOK and rewatch John Carpenter's Christine, people.
I
Both
did
excellent.
Toast and Caught by the Tide, so it hurts. So where can people find you before they find you next week here talking more Stephen King, as we just decided?
Okay. You can find me at thetakeup.com. And also occasionally on Blue Sky, although I'm not really doing much over there. But takeup.com is where you find my writing regularly.
I never tell people I'm on KMOV as well as Take Up.
Josh is a TV star. Did you guys know this? That Josh is a TV star?
Josh had a very embarrassing Friday that he is not going to talk about, but you can see me every Friday on KMOV, First Alert News at 4, reviewing the pictures and making recommendations and, making a fool of himself. But until then, I want to thank Ethan Tarantella for helping to produce and edit the show, Kayla McCullough for our social media. And until next time, I forgot what movie we're doing. I'm walking. Yes, indeed, I'm walking. You and me. This is walking. What are you looking at? All right, bye.